The silence in this village held a peculiar weight, a cold promise that clung to your spine even before dawn's first pale blue light seeped through the mist. You awaken slowly, the subtle creak of wooden beams above, merging with the faint rustle of rats in the straw-stuffed floorboards. Outside, the world is a muted canvas, gray skies swallowing the horizon, the fog wrapping the cluster of thatched roofs like a shroud. The scent of damp earth wrapped you like a thick woolen cloak, mingling with a sharper tang, the lingering odor of unwashed bodies, sweat baked dry under the relentless toil and fear. Your fingers brushed the coarse fibers of your one-worn blanket, rough against your skin like sandpaper, grounding you in this ancient, unforgiving reality. Outside your window, the village lay silent, the usual morning chorus replaced by an eerie quiet. Even the dogs, typically loud in greeting, hadn't barked once. Imagine if modern-day Wi-Fi went down for a minute. Panic would spread. Here, silence was more dangerous, a whisper of the unseen plague threading through your bones. You rise, the chill nibbling through threadbare garments, and pick up your worn knife. The blade's edge feels dull but familiar. A small comfort in endless repetition. Hours stretch on as you sweep the dirt floor, each bristle scraping softly, chasing away specks of yesterday's dust and the ghosts of yesterday's lives. Bread, you recall, was stretched thin with sawdust to fill the bellies that hunger no longer dismissed lightly. A flicker of warmth breaks the monotony. A small fire crackling in the communal hearth, its smoke curling towards the timbered ceiling. Around it, villagers huddle, sharing scraps and moments. The heat is thin, but enough to kindle hope, however fragile, in these frost-bitten days. Yet, beneath the routine, a subtle sign unsettles you. A sudden hush. The chimney's smoke lingers longer than it should, the hearth sparks dimming. Eyes meet across the shadow-heavy room, silent, heavy with meaning. The dog's silence suddenly feels deafening, as if they've sensed a shadow no one dares speak aloud. Something shifts. You pause, hand tightening around the handle of that dull knife, your breath shallow. The village holds its breath with you. Hey, before Morpheus fully claims you, quickly check if you're still subscribed. For some, the button vanished, and I don't want you to miss the next sleepy stories. Take a gentle like, soft as a pillow. Tell me in the comments, where are you listening from, and what time is it there? Your interaction keeps this little calm corner alive. Thanks for being part of it. You step closer to the hearth, drawn by the fragile glow that fights the oppressive grayness pressing in from outside. The fire's smoke curls upward uncertainly, like the village itself, caught between endurance and collapse. The steady crackle is a small rebellion against the cold, a whisper of defiance in a day that feels soaked in dread. The faces gathered around the warmth wear the same haunted look, mirrored in your reflection everywhere. Eyes shadowed beneath furrowed brows, mouths taut against the weight of unspoken fears. They clutch their meager scraps of bread like talismans, chewing slowly, as if the act of eating a quiet protest against the slow spread of silence that has crept through every corner of this place. Outside, beyond the walls framed in rough-hewn timber and thatch, the wind begins to stir, carrying whispers you can't quite place, the sort that twist like smoke, intangible but unmistakably there. It sighs against the brittle bones of dead branches and snakes through the narrow alleys where shadows bend and shift in rhythm with your heartbeat. You tighten your grip on the dull knife, its handle slick with your palm's sweat. Something in the air isn't right. The dogs, those usual sentinels of bark and growl, still hold their silence, as if the village breathes now only through holds between fear and waiting. A sudden draft slides underneath the door, chilling your feet where the floorboards have long forgotten warmth. A movement catches your half-shut eye, an old man shifting near the hearth, the flicker of the fire tracing the lines etched deep into his face. He leans closer to the smoke, eyes narrowing, as if trying to read the future written in the curling tendrils. His lips move silently, weaving prayers or curses lost in the thick air. His presence is an anchor. His quiet urgency speaks to a knowledge you're only beginning to grasp. Outside, the fog thickens until the village is swallowed whole. A ghost swallowed by its own shroud. The faint clatter of a falling branch resonates like a gunshot in the hollow silence. Your chest tightens. Anticipation or dread, it's hard to say. The stillness outside is not peace. It is a waiting room carved by uncertainty, a pause before something inevitably moves. You step to the window, pressing your palm against the cold glass pane. The chill leaching away what little warmth your tired body still clings to. Your breath mists against the pane, merging with the fog outside. Through the blurred glass, shapes loom, walking shadows, or perhaps just the village's own haunted spirit, restless and searching. The smell lingers, that sharp, acrid hint of smoke, but different this time. Something burning too close to home, an edge of sulfur, like when wood falls too long beneath flame's hunger. You swallow hard. The thought of fire here is a cruel joke. Fire means destruction, the very thing a town like this can't afford. But that scent clings stubbornly, like a warning you dare not ignore. In the dim corner of the room, a woman stirs. A mother with eyes as tired as the ancient stones outside. Her child shivers against her, thin hands curled tight over the ragged blanket. She looks up, meeting your gaze, and in that silent exchange, centuries of knowledge pass between you. The unyielding truth that daylight doesn't guarantee safety. It never has. Your feet shuffle as the door creaks, quiet, hesitant, as if the house itself fears what lies beyond. A figure stands framed in the murk. A stranger or a friend is impossible to tell, cloaked in shapes distorted by fog and failing light. The firelight flickers against the worn leather of a satchel, a glint of metal catching something you weren't ready to see. The room holds its breath with you. You want to ask who it is, but your voice feels trapped beneath the pressing weight of silence. The air thickens, frayed at the edges with tension and old fears. You notice the faintest tremor in the stranger's stance. Uncertainty or purpose? Maybe both. An unseen current shifts, pulling you all towards something neither the dawn nor this fragile fire can illuminate. Still, the villagers lean closer to one another, drawn by that ancient instinct to seek safety in numbers. Their murmurs are barely audible, fragments of half-remembered songs, whispered stories meant to anchor them in a reality that seems to dissolve with every breath. Outside, a distant bell tolls, uneven and mournful, like the heartbeat of a village holding onto itself against the fraying edges of hope. You lower your gaze to the knife in your hand, dull though it is, and wonder just how far it will be enough. The flame flickers once more, casting long shadows that stretch past the walls and into the gathering fog. And in that restless dance, you feel it, an unspoken promise breaking the silence. Whatever comes next, it will not wait for the sun. The stranger's voice finally breaks through the hush, quiet but sharp, slicing the stagnant air. There's news, they say, and it will change everything. The stranger's words hang heavy in the air, the embers flickering, as if startled by the sudden sharpness in the room. Silence thickens again, folding over the villagers like a worn cloak, too thin to shield, but still clung to with desperate fingers. Your eyes narrow, tracing the stranger's figure, framed by the fog that presses relentlessly against the window pane. Who is this bearer of weighty news, and why does their voice cut through the village's quiet like a knife blade scraping stone? You swallow hard, tasting the dry grit that clings stubbornly to your throat. Outside, the fog swirls deeper, smelling now not just of damp earth and smoke, but of something darker, an acrid tang that presses against your senses like a warning whispered too close to your ear. The mother near the hearth pulls her child closer, the shiver in the small body echoing the chill running down your spine. This was no ordinary day. Something was turning here, unseen, but shifting, undeniable. The stranger steps forward, leather-clad boots thudding softly on the worn floor. Their eyes catch the dim firelight, steady and unyielding, like a secret locked in stone. They lower the satchel slowly, unbuckling it with care, as if every movement weighed a pound of consequence. You shift a little, the dull knife still gripped in your hand, a fragile reminder of your fragile safety. "Listen," the stranger finally says, voice rough. "The roads to the next village have been sealed. Soldiers, or worse, they say. No one gets through, and no one comes back." The words settle over the room like a heavy fog, merging with that which already filled the ancient air. A murmur ripples through the group, whispers, tangled with fear and disbelief. You see old Thomas, the man who leans quietly near the hearth, grow tight-lipped, his eyes dark pools of knowledge long worn by too many seasons of hardship. He studies the stranger carefully, as if weighing truth against the silent truth the village already held in its bones. "What of the plague?" someone breathes, voice barely more than a thread. It hangs there, fragile, as if uttering the name aloud might summon the horror again. The stranger's gaze flickers, momentarily shadowed. It's not just the sickness anymore. There's talk of soldiers enforcing curfews, burning houses suspected of harboring the ill. The village beyond that ridge, gone. Smoke's all that's left. Heat sears through a sudden rush of panic. Your breath jagged, chest heaving like a bellows struggling against a storm. The fire seems to dim a little, as if the shadows draw nearer with each word. The villagers clutch their blankets tighter. The mother rocks her child gently, whispering lullabies no one hears. Yet amidst the dread, a spark of defiance flickers in your belly. The dull edge of your knife is a reminder, not just of survival, but of fighting back, of standing against the dark that creeps in, not just through plague or soldier, but through silence itself. Outside, the wind sharpens, a cold blade cutting through the timbered walls, rattling shutters and tugging stubborn flakes of ash upward. You catch a glimpse of movement in the mist, shapes weaving in and out of the gray, like ghosts dancing just beyond reach. The night feels alive, lurking in the spaces between heartbeats. "Who brought you here?" Tomas finally asks, voice low and steady, breaking the silence that had settled too thickly. The stranger's lips thin. "The messenger never came back. I was sent in the dark, alone, to find any survivors, to warn." Their eyes flick to yours, sharp and unblinking. A quiet understanding passes between you. This village's fragile hope now rested on a thread thinner than the worn blanket, digging into your skin. The same thread that could snap at any moment, plunging you all into deeper darkness. A sudden snap from outside, a branch breaking under the weight of unknown feet, snaps the small crowd's attention outward. The dogs finally bark, but long and desperate. Their howls slicing through the night with a pain that sets your teeth on edge. The sound crashes against the walls, a brutal reminder that no place, no matter how remote, could hide from the rising tide. You draw a slow breath, the cold biting past your lips, filling your lungs with the sharp, bitter sweetness of fear and determination. As the fire crackles, throwing skeletal shadows that dance like forgotten memories, you realize this night will be counted among those that fracture the village's story into before and after. The stranger reaches into their satchel, pulling out a folded parchment, edges frayed and stained. This, they say, voice hoarse, is a warning from beyond the mountains where no birds sing anymore. Your fingers tremble slightly as you take the paper, its brittle surface whispering secrets of a world unraveling faster than you could have imagined. The flickering firelight casts the ink in ominous patterns, words mixed with maps, marks that seem to beckon toward peril and promise alike. At that moment, the door behind you creaks. Again, slower now, heavier. The night seems to lean in, listening, waiting. You glance back, the stranger's face unreadable, the villagers silent but poised as shadows gather thick in every corner. And then, just as silence begins to reclaim the room, you hear it, a voice carrying on the wind outside, soft but clear enough to slice through the fog. They're coming. Your heart pounds a fierce drum, steady as a war march. The fragile warmth of the hearth seems too small now, nowhere near enough to hold back what darkens beyond. The village, caught between breath and shadow, bristles on the edge of something that won't wait for dawn. You grip the knife tighter, and the room grows still once more, waiting for then. Night to unfold its true face. The stranger's eyes flicker to the brittle parchment in your hand, then back to the dim faces huddled near the dying fire. The room feels thinner now, as if the very walls could dissolve beneath the weight of what's to come. You can almost smell the tension, sharp as fresh sweat, tangled with the acrid tang of smoldering wood barely held at bay. Outside, the night leans deeper into the village, swallowing sounds. The bell's mournful toll fades, replaced by the soft slap of unseen footsteps threading through the thickening fog. Your heart thuds unevenly, syncing with that subtle rhythm, like an old drum beating a warning no one can ignore. The stranger speaks again, voice barely more than a rasp. They're marching down the valley, not far now. A pause, long enough for the silence to stretch thin, then snap. We don't know who exactly or what they want, but rumors speak of no mercy. A cold knot coils inside your stomach. The fire, once flickering bravely, sputters as if caught in the draft that now snakes through every crack and crevice. You glance around. Muttering villagers press closer to the hearth, their shadows tangled in the pale light, like desperate dancers clinging to a fleeting dream. Old Tomas shifts uneasily, his lined face folding deeper in thought. The knowledge he carries, bound in years and hardship, settles heavily on the room. His gaze fixes on the stranger, searching for truth beneath the worn leather and guarded words. The mother rocks her child a little closer, humming a fragile lullaby, barely audible, but enough to stitch a patch of comfort into the frayed fabric of the night. The timbre of her voice trembles, fragile as a candle flame, struggling against the suffocating dark. You step to the window, breath misting on cold glass. Fog coils beyond, like fingers reaching for the faintest light. Shapes lurk, shifting with the crest of your heartbeat. A parade of ghosts or something more mortal, waiting just beyond reach. The scent of burning wood curls upward again, harsher this time, biting at your senses with a promise of ruin. Your fingers tighten on the knife, dull edge pressing into your palm, a small, rough anchor in the rising tide of fear. You remember the stories passed in whispered tones, villages swallowed whole by fire, neighbors torn apart by suspicion, the sick abandoned to shadows. This night could be the beginning of such a tale, or its bitter end. The stranger's gaze sweeps the room once more, settling on you as if measuring the weight of what lies ahead. We have little time, they say. If we wait, we'll be trapped. The roads are closed, and the soldiers don't ask questions before they burn. A low murmur ripples through the group, unease threading faces pale in the firelight. The villagers exchange glances, heavy with dread and disbelief, clutching at their meager belongings, as if sheer will could stave off the inevitable. Suddenly, a faint crack, branches snapping under hurried steps beyond the window. The dogs finally break their silence, their frantic barks splintering the stillness. The sound crashes into the room, echoing raw and desperate, stirring something primal in your chest. For the first time, fear coalesces into a sharp, tangible pulse. Thomas rises slowly, joints creaking like the timbers above. His voice, when he speaks, is low and steady, a brittle thread weaving through the storm. Tonight we decide if the flame of this village goes out or burns through the darkness. The mother tucks her child beneath her cloak, eyes shining with silent resolve. The stranger slings the satchel over one shoulder, posture rigid, prepared to step once more into the cold unknown. You inhale sharply, the air tasting of ash and quiet rebellion. Somewhere deep inside, a flicker of defiance kindles, muted but unmistakable. The knife isn't just survival. It's a promise to stand, to resist, to face whatever shadow shapes the night. The fire crackles, throwing skittering shadows that chase and vanish along the worn floorboards. Outside, the fog thickens until even those shadows merge into the gray unknown. A whisper, barely caught on the edge of hearing, slips through the window's draft, a voice carried on the wind, clear and cold. They're closer than you think. And just as the flame dips low, as if reluctant to reveal more, you realize the night is no longer waiting. It's moving. Your grip on the knife tightens. The village holds its breath. The door's creak seems slower now, heavier, as if the house itself hesitates before surrendering to whatever prowls the night. A chill swirls under your ribs, licking bones and nerve ends alike, as footsteps, tentative but growing in purpose, stir the thick fog outside. The stranger's breath hitches, a sharp sound swallowed almost immediately. You catch the subtle shift in the air, that faint snap of taut strings ready to snap. Thomas, the old man, stiffens, his gaze honing in past the stranger's shoulder, tracing movements invisible in the gloom. The mother clutches her child tighter, the small body trembling beneath threadbare cloth. Even the fire seems to freeze on the brink of exhaustion, casting brittle shadows. Dance with reluctant flickers. Outside, the fog thickens, swallowing the cracks of sound like secrets locked in invisible safes. The bell's mournful toll fades into distant echoes, replaced now by the hastened rhythm of footsteps. Dozens, it seems, pressing through the wet earth and broken branches. Their pattern is uneven, anxious, and the crunch of gravel under booted feet pierces the night's veil like sharp glass. You tighten your grip on that old knife, its weight familiar and rough against your palm, grounding you in the moment. The dull edge isn't just a tool, it is a silent vow, fragile, yes, but unwavering. The weight of the parchment, tucked just inside your coat, presses reassuringly against your ribs. The marks on its surface, maps crinkled and words blurred by time and toil, hold a ghost of hope or perhaps a curse. The stranger steps forward, lowering the satchel to the floor, with a finality deeper than mere gravity. Their eyes catch the firelight, a flicker of something unspoken, a promise tangled in shadows. They say the soldiers come with fire and iron, burning anything that moves. Any shelter for the sick means nothing. A low murmur ripples from the clustered villagers, the faintest tremble of panic that threads through crowded bodies. You sense the weight of those words dropping into hollow chests, filling cracks worn thin by months of fear. Outside, the first crack of a branch breaking stiffens the room. The dog's howls erupt suddenly, raw, desperate splintering. Through the quiet, with the force of a hammer blow, the sound crashes against wooden walls, rattling shutters and rattling bones. Tomas moves, slow but certain, the creak of his joints a metronome, marking the turning of fate. "We stand at the edge tonight," he says, voice low but carrying weight. A choice between letting this fire die or fanning it into life. If we burn united. The mother, eyes fierce despite weariness, cradles her child closer. Her lullaby is no longer just for protection. It is a call to arms, soft and steady, seeding courage in fragile hearts. You step to the window, pressing your palm against the cold glass, feeling the damp skin of the fog creeping in fingertips. In the swirling gray beyond, Shapes begin to coalesce, figures bent by hooded cloaks, shadows clutching at the edge of reason. Their faces are invisible, but their intent presses like a physical force. The scent of smoke curls anew, harsher this time, biting at your senses with a sharp, bitter promise. It's no longer a question of if the village will burn, but when. The acrid curl of sulfur drifts in the air, fire carried on wind, nearer than comfort allows. You return to the circle by the hearth. The dull knife feels heavier in your hand now. A weapon, yes, but more a talisman wrought from desperation and resolve. The stranger's gaze finds yours again, steady and unblinking. We must move. There's no safety in waiting. A shiver races through the room as shutters rattle. A sudden gust tearing at the thatch overhead. The wind carries something. Voices? Commands? A chorus of shadows growing bolder. The fragile flame of the fire flickers violently before settling into a rhythm that matches your rising heartbeat. Tomas nods grimly. We prepare. Tonight decides everything. Outside, the fog shifts once more, and the muffled thud of heavy boots resumes. Closer now, a storm of quiet menace, pressing in on the village's fragile peace. The mother's lullaby halts, replaced by a silence so dense it almost breathes, wrapping the room in cold anticipation. You glance once more at the parchment, edges curling in the firelight. The marks on it seem to writhe, a map to survival or a harbinger of doom. Your fingers close around it tightly. Then, from the swirling gloom beyond the cracked window, a lone voice drifts in, a whisper torn from the wind, thin and sharp. They're closer than anyone realizes. Your breath catches tight in your chest. The knife, the fire, the village, the waiting shadow, all hold steady for a moment, suspended between the last flicker of hope and the first step into the coming darkness. The footsteps grow louder outside, uneven and quick, pressing against the fragile barrier of timber and thatch. Each snap of a twig feels like a gunshot, hollow and final, carving silence into the night. Your breath catches as the fire's light shudders, casting long, twitching shadows that crawl along the walls, desperate to escape into the fog. The villagers huddle tighter around the hearth, faces painted in flickering orange and gray. Thomas grips his staff with knuckles white as bone, his eyes sharper now, scanning every inch of darkness beyond the cracked window. The mother rocks her child with a trembling rhythm, singing a lullaby that barely holds back the swirling storm outside. The fire crackles, a fragile heartbeat defying the cold that seeps through every crack and splinter. You shift in the circle, the worn knife still a dull but steady weight in your palm. It's more than metal. It's a tether to survival, to resistance. The scent of smoke curls anew, acrid and close, biting at your nostrils with the cruel promise of burning wood and shattered lives. Somewhere close fire waits, patient, hungry. Outside, a sudden gust rattles the shutters violently. Dry leaves scuttle across the floor like whispers, the breath of some unseen presence. The fog thickens until the world beyond the glass dissolves into a wet, gray unknown. Like the village itself is trapped inside a dream gone wrong, held captive by shadows that pull at the edge of reason. The stranger steps forward, a leather on their boots creaking softly in the wooden stillness. Their eyes, stark and unblinking, meet yours across the meager crowd. "They're coming," they say again, voice low but steady, carving a line of steel through the haze. Soldiers with fire and chains, no mercy for the sick. No questions asked. A murmur ripples through the room, half belief, half fear. Old Tomas's lips press into a thin line. His gaze darkens, carrying the weight of too many winters and too many losses. You can almost feel him recalling names and faces, swallowed by nights like this one. Those who vanished without a trace, swallowed by flames or by silence. The mother presses her child closer still, low and steady, with whispered promises no child could fully understand. The babe's shaky breath mingles with the acrid smoke curling through the cracked window. You press your palm harder against the cold glass, fog misting beneath your touch. In the swirl beyond, indistinct shapes gather, figures bent beneath heavy cloaks, faces hidden but undeniably present. They move with a harsh purpose, a tide coming from the valley below, relentless and roaring in your chest. The room feels smaller now, the walls closing in like the tightening grip of a noose. The fire sputters sharply, a last defiant flare before dimming, shadows lengthening into roars of black. Then, without warning, a dull knocking, 3 times, slow and deliberate, breaks the silence. It echoes down the hollow corridors of the village like a summons. Every eye snaps toward the doorframe. Breaths held so tight they threaten to shatter. Thomas's voice cuts through the tension. "Who goes there?" No answer. Only the creak of the old door trembling on its hinges as the knocking starts again. 4 soft, measured taps. Your grip tightens on the knife's handle, sweat slipping beneath your fingers. The stranger steps closer to the threshold, hand poised over the latch, the worn leather satchel resting heavy at their side, as if carrying the weight of every fear in the room. Outside, the wind shifts, carrying a faint scent, not just smoke this time, but iron and cold leather, a metallic tang that turns your stomach sour. The mother's lullaby falters, her voice cracking as the child flinches, a quiet warning carried on a night that no child should ever know. "You have to decide," Tomas says, turning slowly toward the small crowd. "Open it, or let the darkness wait in silence." The knocking stretches again, this time faster, urgent almost, like a heartbeat racing to meet its fate. You swallow the dryness thick in your throat, eyes darting between Tomas's steady gaze, the stranger's poised hand, and the wavering firelight. The village, caught in the jagged edge between death and survival, moves as one toward the fragile door. With a breath that tastes like ash and old regrets, the stranger pulls back the latch. The door creaks open into a wall of gray fog that seems alive. Shapes swirling like smoke, twisted by a restless wind. And then, as if pulled from the depths of the mist itself, a figure steps forward. A silhouette against the cold, faintly outlined by the dying light. A traveler or a sentinel, but part of the coming storm. Their voice is low, rough as gravel and cold, as the night that surrounds you. We don't have long. The flames aren't just behind us anymore. They're here. The fire sputters out, plunging the room into a silence so dense it presses against your skin. Every breath, every heartbeat, speaks of the thin thread holding the village, fragile as the fog outside. You glance down at the knife, dull now, but steady. A small ember of defiance. The stranger's eyes meet yours again, unblinking in the dark, and somewhere beyond the gathering gloom, the wind carries a single, haunting word, sharper than any blade. Run. Your world narrows to that one command, as the door closes behind the stranger, sealing the fate of a village trembling on the edge of night. The door shut behind the stranger with a finality that pressed against your chest like the fog settling thick and unyielding around the village. Silence wrapped the room again, but now it wasn't the calm before a storm. It was the eye, a suffocating stillness, pregnant with unspoken dread. You stand there, the dull knife cold and heavy in your hand, the leather satchel's weight a constant reminder of the words folded inside it. The fire gutters weakly, casting long shadows that stretched like creeping fingers across the cracked floorboards. Outside, the night breathed in ragged silences, the damp air sharp with that acrid burn you'd caught on the wind before. Smoke, but something closer. Too close. The villagers press tighter around the hearth, their faces pale and drawn, eyes flickering between you and the stranger's lingering shadow near the door. Thomas's old hands rest on his staff, the wood worn smooth by years of leaning. His eyes narrowed like a hawk's, cutting through the gloom as if searching for some glimpse beyond the fog. The mother hushes her child again, a trembling lullaby barely reaching your ears. The child's tiny fingers curl into her threadbare cloak, seeking warmth in a world that's been unkind for too long. Their shared shivers seem to echo the tremor running down your spine, the weight of what's to come, settling like a stone you can't will away. Outside, a restless wind stirs the fog, pressing it tighter against the walls, as though the mist itself wants to squeeze the breath from the village. Faint, uneven footsteps crumble against the dirt and shattered twigs beyond the window, pausing and moving. like a slow march of ghosts you cannot see, but can feel crawling at the edges of your mind. You move toward the window, pressing your palm to the cold glass, watching the murky silhouettes through the thickened mist. Cloaked shapes flicker just beyond the reach of the firelight, their movements sharp and jagged, like staccato breaths caught in a nightmare. The air tastes metallic now, a bitter tang that curls in your mouth and drifts in on the wind, like a warning from some distant, broken world. Your fingers tighten on the hilt of your knife. It's dulled by time and use, useless against steel or fire, but still a symbol, a stubborn heartbeat against the growing silence. The stranger steps forward, voice low and steady, breaking that silence like a falling stone. They're not far, they say, eyes glinting under the tired firelight. Soon they'll be at the edge of the village. No mercy this time, no warnings, only fire. Murmurs run like a cold ripple through the circle, breath catching in chests, shadows pulling tighter around shoulders. Thomas's voice slices through the rising panic. We can't wait. If they find us here, trapped, it'll be the end. A gust shudders through the cracks, rattling shutters, sending the flames of the hearth to dance wildly before dimming again. The mother's lullaby falters, the fragile thread of hope fraying almost to silence. The air outside thickens with anticipation, the fog now a living wall, swallowing sound, blotting sight, hiding whatever unforgiving judgment hunts these weary lanes. You glance at the parchment peeking from the satchel's fold, the maps and scrawled warnings folded into bitter truths. The ink seems to writhe in the flickering firelight, each mark tracing a path deeper into the unknown, a descent into dangers lurking past every ridge and valley. A sudden pause falls over the room. Then a sharp crack, a branch snapping close, too close. The dog's frantic barking explodes, raw and desperate, fracturing the night's fragile stillness with cries full of warning and sorrow. The sound is a flare of wild energy, a wild heartbeat pounding against an inevitable dusk. Tomas straightens, staff firm in his grasp, voice low but fierce. Tonight we fight, or tonight we become the smoke. The villagers lean in, clutching each other, as if their intertwined grips might hold back the darkness that drums heavy outside. You feel it in every breath, the tightening noose of fear, the stark clarity that this night will mark everything dividing past from future. Outside, something shifts in the fog. Figures break from the swirling gray, stepping silently between the shadows and the firelight. Faces remain hidden beneath heavy hoods, but their harsh shapes are unmistakable. Soldiers or ravagers, eyes burning with cold purpose. Your breath cords tight in your throat. The dull knife, the satchel, the fragile fire, they are your small, stubborn weapons in a world collapsing into shadow and flame. The stranger's eyes lock onto yours, a silent command passing between you, a call to stand against the night that no dawn can hold back. With a breath tasting of ash and ice, you turn toward the assembly, your voice steady. Prepare yourselves. This night will decide what story we tell, the one of ashes or the one of flame. And as the first shadow crosses beyond the threshold, a whispered threat slips on the wind, curling through the village like smoke and steel. Tonight, none shall be spared. The door shut behind the stranger, its echo fading into the thick fog that now pressed against the village like a living thing. The room felt colder, stripped of its already fragile warmth, as if the shadows themselves had leaned in, eager to swallow every flicker of hope. Your fingers tightened around the rough handle of the dull knife, the worn leather satchel at your side, a heavy reminder of the weight now resting between breaths. Outside, the restless wind whispered low through the brittle trees, sending a shiver that cut through the empty spaces of the house. The fog thickened further, swallowing the cracked window into a blur of gray that seemed endless, a shroud draping the world in quiet despair. Around the fading hearth, the villagers leaned into the shrinking circle of light, their faces pale and taut, eyes reflecting the fire's last flickers like haunted mirrors. Thomas's old hands gripped his staff with white-knuckled resolve, his jaw set as if bracing for the storm that had already begun. The mother held her child close, her lullaby fallen silent, replaced by a steady heartbeat against the cold that seemed to seep from the very stones. Your breath was shallow, caught between the tightness in your lungs and the acrid smoke that lingered faintly in the air, the promise of fire creeping closer, like an unseen predator stalking its prey. A sudden creak announced movement further down the hall, the worn floorboards sighing beneath uncertain footsteps. The stranger reappeared, their eyes burning with a quiet urgency as they pulled the satchel closer, carefully retrieving the folded parchment wrapped in faded cloth. The flickering firelight caught the edges of the paper as if it might ignite with the stories etched upon it. Maps marked with cryptic symbols, warnings scrawled in ink now blurred by time and sweat. Your eyes traced the lines, each fold a secret passed down into this moment of reckoning. "They're moving faster than expected," the stranger murmured, voice low and rough. "Soldiers, not just patrollers, but those sent to erase, to cleanse." Murmurs stirred through the gathered crowd, a chorus of fear tangled with disbelief. Tomas's eyes darkened with the memory of names whispered long ago, swallowed by silence and ash. The mother curled inwards, her child's breath rattling softly against her chest, a fragile counterpoint to the growing storm. Outside, the night held its breath. The wind clawed at shutters, rattling them with impatient hands. The fog twisted and coiled, shifting like smoke caught in a slow dance with the earth. Somewhere just beyond sight, shapes moved, figures pressing against the dark, their edges blurred, but intent sharp as blades, hidden beneath heavy cloaks. You pressed your palm to the cold glass, fog moistening your skin with quiet insistence. The scent that curled in the air was no longer just damp earth and smoldering wood. Beneath it lay the bitter tang of iron, blood yet to be spilled, promises broken too soon. Tomas broke the silence, his voice a steady drumbeat amid the rising dread. We cannot wait for mercy. We prepare, or we become the ashes carried away on the wind. A faint snap, a branch breaking close, shattered the fragile stillness. The dog's barks erupted suddenly, raw and desperate, echoing like gunfire through the empty lanes. The sound shook the village awake from its frozen pause, a sharp reminder that the night had teeth. Your grip on the knife closed tighter. The edge may have been dull, but its weight grounded you, a stubborn pulse against the growing darkness. The stranger's gaze swept the room again, settling on your face with an intensity that pierced through the flickering shadows. There's no turning back. The paths out are sealed. Waiting means death. Quiet, slow, and certain. The mother, face pale but fierce, lifted her eyes to yours, a silent plea threaded with fierce determination. The woven hands of the villagers clasped tighter, a unity born less of hope than of necessity. Suddenly, the fragile flames of the hearth flickered wild, as if caught in a breath too harsh to survive. Shadows stretched long and merciless, clawing along the floorboards, licking at the edges of the room. Outside in the thickening fog, the faint sound of heavy boots advanced in uneven rhythm. The crunch of earth and broken twigs growing louder, closer. Each step a heartbeat pounding in your chest. A shudder passed through the house as the door rattled in its frame, a hollow sound like a warning breath before the storm. The knocking began again, slow, deliberate, then urgent, echoing against the walls, vibrating in your bones. Tomas rose, staff planted firmly in dirt and wood, gaze steady and unyielding. Tonight we decide the fate of this village, to burn as one or to be consumed alone. The mother whispered a prayer, her voice barely a thread woven into the thick silence. Her child nestled deeper into her ragged cloak, the shiver softened by a fragile tether of trust. The stranger moved toward the door, hand poised, muscles tense, a final barrier between fragile hope and encroaching darkness. You stepped closer, feeling the cold bite through your garments, the dull knife, a fading talisman in a world unraveling around you. The knocking ceased, and in that breathless moment, a voice came from beyond, low and cruel. There, the words sliced through the fog, carried on a breath that was neither wind nor shadow. The fire guttered, its last sparks spiraling upward in a dance of defiance. Your heart hammered against ribs iced by fear and resolve. The village held its breath and waited for the night to claim its due. The night held its breath, a fragile pause woven through the village, like the final thread of an old, fraying tapestry. The door had closed quietly behind the stranger, sealing the room in a hush thick as wool, the weight of unsaid fears sinking deep into your bones. The fire, once a small beacon of stubborn life, flickered low and slow, its embers like faint heartbeats fading into the dark. You stood there, the worn knife a familiar weight against your palm, a symbol, if nothing else, of defiance in a world slipping quietly into shadow. The satchel rested heavy at your side, its folded parchment pressed against your ribs. A map marked by hope and uncertainty, an uncertain guide through this unfolding storm. Outside, the fog wrapped the village in a soft but unforgiving shroud. Shapes moved just beyond sight, shadows interlacing with mist like restless memories. The scent of smoke lingered still, sharper now, biting softly with reminders of fire and ruin that threatened to consume what little remained. But inside, the hearth cracked once more, a flicker of warmth against the cold that pressed from every crack and crevice. Eyes met. Across the small, worn circle, ancient lines etched with hardship and quiet resolve. Thomas's gaze was steady and sharp, the strength of many winters behind it. The mother, clutching her child close, offered a faint but unwavering smile, fragile as morning light on frost. You exhaled slowly, the breath a soft cloud before the cold glass, and stepped forward. The weight of all those who waited, hoped, and feared with you pressed near. This was no longer just survival, it was a choice. The stranger's voice broke the silence again, lower now, edged with quiet urgency. They're close, but so are we. A murmur stirred among the villagers, a subtle awakening, like the first stirrings of dawn, hidden behind storm clouds. The fear that had gripped hearts began to shift, replaced by something equally raw but sharper, the stubborn pulse of resistance. Tomas lifted his staff, the wood worn and splintered, but as solid as the earth beneath your feet. If they come with fire, we'll meet them with light, not just from hearth, but heart. Together. The mother hummed a lullaby, her voice steady despite trembling lips, weaving a thread of calm through the gathering darkness. Her child's breath slowed, a steady counterpoint to the tension that still hung thick in the air. Outside, the muffled crunch of footsteps softened, almost hesitant now, as if the fog itself paused. The night held its secret a moment longer, a breath caught between past and future. You took the parchment from the satchel, unfolding it carefully. The inked marks, once ominous and blurred, now seemed to trace a path, not just through land, but through the shadow that weighed on all of you. The stranger's eyes met yours, unblinking and quietly urging. "There's a way forward," they murmured. "Not easy, but possible. Beyond the ridge, the woods hold a hollow, shelter forgotten by time. We can reach it before dawn." Hope, thin but undeniable, seeped through the room like sunlight, slipping past heavy curtains. Eyes brightened, worn faces softened, shadows that had clung for months loosened their grip. Tomas shook his head slowly, a smile breaking like dawn through grit. Then we move. Now, we don't wait for the end to find us. You nodded, the dull knife now a talisman-bound promise of new beginnings. The villagers stirred, hands brushing over worn blankets, fingers finding the warmth of others. The mother tucked her child close, eyes shining with a quiet fire born from desperation and hope entwined. The stranger packed the satchel with the same care worn by countless journeys. The fire's glow seemed to pulse stronger, as if feeding on the rising courage within these walls. Outside, the fog began to lift, threads of mauve and slate revealing the silhouette of trees guarding the darkened path. You stepped to the doorway, the chill still sharp, but different, a breath from the past now mingling with the scent of dawn. The village held its breath, no longer in fear, but in quiet readiness. Tomas's staff pressed lightly against your shoulder, a steady weight grounding the moment. Whatever comes beyond that ridge, we face it as one. The wind stirred, tentative and soft, carrying with it the faint call of morning birds, and the promise of a new day waiting just beyond the horizon. The heavy door creaked open once more, laughter and light still far away, but no longer unimaginable. You drew in a deep breath, tasting the crisp air, feeling the pulse of life, both fragile and fierce, in your veins. The knife might be dull, the satchel heavy, but your spirit had sharpened, forged in the quiet hours of waiting, and tempered by the unyielding strength of shared resolve. As the village moved forward, together, toward that trembling promise of survival, the night finally seemed to exhale. The fog unwound, the fireglow softened, and in that gentle easing, peace settled like a thin blanket over weary shoulders. The silence changed then, from a warning to a lullaby, a closing note sung softly by a world that had endured, and quietly began to heal. And so, beneath a sky lightening with the first pale blush of dawn, the village stepped into the unknown, no longer as shadows caught in waiting, but as the steady burn of life pushing back against the dark. The night's long hold loosened. The knife rested. The fire warmed. You and all of them moved forward into the soft embrace of morning's calm.